All right, welcome everyone. My name is Toby. I work at Gnosis on a team that builds the Gnosis Safe. The Gnosis Safe is a smart contract wallet. And in the first part of this presentation, I'd like to kind of motivate again, like, why do we build smart contract wallets? Why are they a good thing? What can they be used for? Then I like to share a bit on where we are currently with the Gnosis Safe, with what use cases we have in mind. And then afterwards, I like to go into more details on what challenges we are facing, and then also what are open questions where we don't have the answer yet, where we have a couple of ideas and opinions, but basically I'm also looking forward to get your opinions on that. So, there's an explosion of, well, accounts and funds held on Ethereum. There are more than 70 million accounts that hold or held funds at some point, and currently, well, the value of just Ether and the top ERC20 tokens is more than 30 billion. And well, this number is growing and hopefully keeps growing. No matter, there's definitely a need to store funds securely currently. And if we take a look at how do users or how are funds currently stored, there's a couple of main places. Centralized exchanges, they're used for a lot of user onboarding as well, because people have to exchange fiat into crypto. They're obviously not ideal. They're not trustless. They are a central point of failure, and there's plenty of examples where this went into the wrong direction. Then there's plenty of decentralized options. MetaMask, probably the most popular one. There's a couple of other ones that are, all these are, as far as I know, not using smart contracts in their wallets, but like to store the funds. They are based on single private keys. We also basically did a small survey within people who work in crypto, just to get a feeling on what they currently use, if they use mobile wallets at all. Because if we look at the landscape out there, there's MetaMask, which now also has a mobile wallet, but there's really a lot of them available. And we have to see if there's really adoption for them. We saw that like 2/3 of the people make a transaction weekly or more often. And most of them use MetaMask. They feel somehow comfortable with it. I guess it's kind of working. It's not ideal, but it's somehow working. Actually, more people own a hardware wallet. People feel more comfortable. I guess they feel more secure when they use a hardware wallet, which is, to a certain extent understandable. Still not ideal. And even more people have a mobile wallet. But that one is not used at all to store a significant number of funds yet. So the reason for that, we believe, is that most of these wallets use so-called externally owned accounts. These are accounts that are based on a single private key. This single private key is used to derive a public address, which is essentially your Ethereum address. This is how it works. This comes with a couple of drawbacks. So you do have to make sure that you keep your seed phrase somehow secure, that you do back it up. If you don't have that, there's no way for you to recover, because there's not really an access control on the low level possible. You either have access to everything or to nothing. So if an attacker or someone else gets a hold of your private key, they can transfer out all your funds or exit all your funds. If they don't have it, they also cannot do it. That means if you lose it, you cannot do it either. And they're, to a certain extent, limited on the features that we can add to them, because of the fact that there's only this single private key. So users are not ready for it. This is an example. Users thought they have backed it up. They even understood they have to back it up, which is the first step that has to happen. But then in the case of a recovery attempt, they could not do it. A short note on hardware wallets. They seem to be quite popular right now. Also, they seem to have covered quite a big share of the last big wave of new users that came into the space. The users that basically looked for an alternative besides centralized options or centralized exchanges. And they still work with these so-called externally owned accounts, so single private key. They are in some sense better because it's basically a USB stick, which is air-gapped, so there is no constant internet connection, and so they don't expose that private key. All data that has to be signed is sent to the device where the signing is happening, and only the signature is transferred out. So it makes people feel more comfortable, meaning more secure, but they still have that problem. If the seed is lost and the device is malfunctioning, everything is gone. So it is a solution for right now, but ultimately this also still doesn't scale because the same drawbacks, like on the slide before, still apply. One note on Ethereum account types. So I've been talking about these externally owned accounts. This is what basically you get when you set up your MetaMask wallet. Most importantly, your balance is stored there, and this is only accessible with your private key. Besides that, Ethereum also has contract accounts. And the nice thing is that on Ethereum, they are both so-called first-class citizens. That means generally, any action, any activity that you can do with these regular accounts, you could also do with a smart contract account. So most importantly, a contract account could also have, well, a balance. But besides using that single private key to basically access the funds, all access control mechanisms and how things, well, how basically who is allowed to access funds is defined in the smart contract code, which makes it way more flexible and way more extensible in a sense. Yes, this is an overview of what smart contract wallets enable. It's a lot. I was hoping that I could use Google Slides, but this is now a PDF, so we go through it one by one. First of all, what I mentioned before, it's improved access control. Most importantly, you can implement multi-factor authentication. That means you have not only one private key, but you have two. For example, every time you want to authorize a transaction, you sign with the first key, and only if the second key also signs, the transaction is ultimately executed. This is a nice thing. For example, if, you start a project, you have a co-founder, you only want to make transactions with your company or your project funds when both of you agree. So basically you need two signatures. Sometimes this is a little bit annoying when there's only small amounts. So basically you could say per day everyone is allowed to spend up to 0.5 ETH without the need of having that additional signature. That's why you could also implement spending limits or transfer limits. You could implement them in a very basic way where you just have that limit, or you say bigger transfers have a time delay and it could be challenged by the second owner of that wallet, but that's all flexibly possible. You could also work with whitelists, so you can approve addresses you interact with a lot, and so for that you have reduced security mechanisms in place, and only when there is a new contract or a new address you would like to interact with, then you need more than one authentication factor. And last but not least, in this access control category, very important to mention is seedless recovery. So this is essentially a word that describes recovery options beyond just backing up a single recovery phrase or single private key. The classic example there is social recovery. So essentially you would define a group of friends that in the case you have lost access to your funds, you have lost access to your device, they would vouch for you and say like, yeah, this is really the person, and then you would be able to get back access to your funds. Of course, if these are not your friends anymore, they could also try to basically steal your funds, which is one of the reasons why it's not that simple. But you could combine it also, again, with a time lock. So when your friends said like, yeah, this person lost access, then you have 1 week or however you defined beforehand to basically challenge that in case, well, it wasn't you or you still have access. The second big category is that with smart contract wallets, we could allow third parties to submit transactions. This is what is commonly referred to as meta transactions. So you can collect all these signatures beforehand, and since the smart contract code defines who is allowed or what signatures have to be present in order to really execute a transaction, anyone can then submit that transaction to the blockchain because you have previously collected all required signatures. That way, you could implement that thing called gasless transactions, so that the user that actually owns the smart contract wallet doesn't really have to pay the gas fee, because it could be paid, it could be subsidized in the end by another third party. Or ultimately, probably the better idea, that dApps would pay the fees of their users. Another option to basically leverage that is that you can allow users to pay transaction fees not only in Ether, but also in an approved set of ERC20 tokens. For example, in the case of the Gnosis Safe, we allow users, amongst other things, to pay in DAI, which we believe is important for user adoption. Users come into the space. For example, they get onboarded with the burner wallet, so this is on XDAI, they try out, they get comfortable with crypto, they transfer from this XDAI chain their funds to DAI on the main chain, which they cannot do anything with it. So either they use a wallet that supports gasless transactions, or they can make arbitrary transactions with something like the Gnosis Safe or smart contract wallet that accepts DAI as a payment option. The third big category is you can simplify interactions with other contracts by batching transactions together. So what I mean by this is when you interact with a decentralized exchange, or the classic example is actually opening up a CDP on Maker. This requires anywhere between 3 and 7 transactions, and that pop up one after each other, and the next one can only pop up if the first one has been successfully executed. And yeah, this is a little bit annoying as a user, and also for the user it's harder to understand because it's a single business step. Why is there the need for having 3 separate transactions? And on a smart contract level, we leverage delegate calls for that, and this allows us to basically put this all together, and a user just has to sign a single transaction. To put this all into context, there's this small overview of current fund storage solutions on Ethereum. The x-axis is going from highly convenient to inconvenient, and convenience is basically how good is the UX, is there a client available for not only desktop but also mobile, how available is it, is it constantly connected to the internet or not? And then the y-axis is basically just a rough metric for the security. And so hardware wallets are considered to be relatively secure, they're relatively inconvenient. Then there is centralized exchanges, quite convenient in my opinion right now, but considered not to be secure. And then decentralized wallets are probably somewhere in this area. And then there's other current existing multi-signature wallets that are also considered to be safe, but also relatively inconvenient. And we're, with the next generation of smart contract wallets, we try to be in this basically a sector. And besides the Gnosis Safe, there's also the team from Argent working on that. And as far as I know, there's also Dapper Labs working on a smart contract wallet, which are all relatively similar, but they have their differences. And the one thing they have in common is that they try to build a very convenient yet still secure fund storage solution. Just some words on the background why we even do this at Gnosis. Back in 2017, when Gnosis did their token sale, there was no nice fund storage solution where the founders could be sure that none of them would basically run away with the funds. And so that's why we wrote the old, what we call Gnosis multi-sig contract. It has up until today more than 2,000 deployed instances, and they hold a significant amount of funds. And this is basically what we started with. And there was a web interface. It was the contracts were written in a time where gas costs were not an issue, so they are relatively expensive, and also they were not extensible because it was just simply not necessary. But this is basically the basis, and from that we basically derived some requirements for building the Gnosis safe. This leads us to that part where I talk about where we are right now. There's two different kinds or flavors of the Gnosis safe. They all build on the same set of smart contracts. They are written in a general way that they can be adapted to different use cases. The first use case is for individuals wanting to store their funds. Actually, I will go into that on the next slide. And then there's also the Gnosis Safe for teams, which is for teams managing funds collectively, because some of the requirements are a little bit different. For single users, we actually had some assumptions. So we thought they have only a limited set of devices available. They have a mobile phone, and most of them, at least that's what we started with, have a laptop. So these devices are basically suitable for storing keys. So there's one key that is stored on the mobile app. It's available on the App Store. You can try it out. And the second key would be on their laptop. And we opted for a Chrome browser extension as a first step. And yeah, all transactions have to be confirmed by that browser extension. We build it in a way that the key never leaves the device. So that way we reduce the probability of, well, that key being compromised somehow. There's still a recovery phrase because we have not yet implemented any of these seedless recovery options, but for making transactions you would not need that phrase. You can pay transaction fees in Ether and ERC20 tokens, like I mentioned before, because we believe this is especially important for user onboarding. And you can use dApps, DeFi apps via Wallet Connect. And this means both mobile to desktop. This is the most common way. Most apps, I believe, are or start at least on desktop. You simply scan a QR code, and then you can authorize any transaction with your wallet. But this also would work mobile to mobile. So assuming there would be a dApp that would write a mobile app, they would not have to implement also a wallet inside this mobile app, but they could just interact with a Wallet Connect enabled wallet, such as the Gnosis Safe, to make transactions. Yes?
Is that mobile to mobile already done?
So yes, the question was, is that mobile to mobile already done? And so the answer is, it is possible from the wallet's perspective. I haven't seen many dApps other than just POCs, like some proof of concepts that would do that. But so it would use some kind of deep linking scheme in order to basically go back and forth between the wallet. But it is possible, yeah. So the Gnosis Safe would work with that.
Sorry. You said it's possible. That means there is an SDK to integrate with Gnosis Safe, for example, to implement this mobile-to-mobile integration?
There's the SDK, I believe, is from Wallet Connect, actually. And basically, we support the deep linking schemes on our end. So that's how you would do it as a developer.
Thank you.
Okay, this video doesn't work. Gnosis Safe for teams. So here, instead of having a single person that holds all factors, all authentication factors, there's more than one person. So this leads to different requirements because we learned people from the same team are not always in the same place. So when you want to authorize a transaction, this could take, for example, up to well, maybe even a week until all signatures have been collected. So we had to build it differently. And also, we started here with a web app because we learned when there's a lot of funds involved, this is what people feel comfortable with. And yeah, we will consider different interfaces in the future, but that's what we start with. It's way more flexible, so you're not restricted to these 2 devices. You can add any owners that you want, and you can also define the number, the threshold, basically the number of signatures required to make a transaction. We have a working version on a testnet for this, and we will soon be on mainnet. Soon means by October. If you're interested in that, yeah, please check out our website. And that one without. So, yes, that's enough for the product that we have. But what are the current challenges? So why are not more users using smart contract wallets? Essentially, why haven't we seen more adoption? Smart contract wallets are still relatively new. So users are just way more comfortable, way more knowledgeable about what they have been first presented. And it's just, I guess, normal. So it was hard enough to basically onboard to crypto, to onboard to their first wallet, and then they learn about smart contract wallets, and this would be another switch. So this is a problem. Then there's this "it won't happen to me" syndrome, how I would like to call it. Basically, that means even if users understand the security issues with single private key-based wallets, people don't think that they lose their key, that the key would somehow get stolen, and that's why they don't see a need for having more secure solutions. And then the other extreme is that people basically have this fear over the security. Most people still remember the Parity multi-signature hack. For those who don't know, Parity also had a multi-signature contract, and that got hacked, and funds were frozen. And it's definitely a valid concern. It's not possible to reduce the risk of that there's a bug in a smart contract to zero. We at Gnosis, we try to mitigate that by having our code audited, and also we had the base version of the contracts being formally verified by a third-party company. And also, before we roll out our updates to our users, we also transfer, we have basically a honeypot contract, which we upgrade first. So if there's an attacker, they could try out basically to steal the funds from that honeypot first. So essentially, the strategy there is trust will come over time. All in all, we still believe, most importantly, these are things that we can somehow tackle by educating users, and they will maybe resolve over time. But besides that, we still believe that the full potential is not yet leveraged. And so this leads us to the last part. Essentially, where are we going? So first, we learned this Chrome extension is not ideal because anytime you want to make a transaction, you would have to open your laptop, even though it would be something you would do just on your mobile. So we started to offer more convenient two-factor authentication options. Yeah, we want to integrate hardware wallets. We will have support for the status key card, which is an NFC-based hardware wallet on a basically credit card format. We will have that by October, and we are also working with Ledger on an integration. So so users could connect their hardware wallet directly to their mobile phone without the need of having to go still via a web page and so their laptop. Then the question, pay transaction fees. Actually, we have an opinion on that, and we are at Gnosis skeptical to subsidizing all transactions at this point. Because essentially we thought the one or the entity or the party that has the most value should pay the transaction fees. So one could argue, well, the user has the value. Okay, you could still argue the wallet has the value because they have the user. So we should maybe pay them. But is this, so for new user onboarding, I think there's no question about it because this is a major friction point. But how does this behave long term? So is it really good that a wallet long term pays the transaction fees? Because ultimately that's important for the security of the network, and it's just one thing that is different from Web 2.0. And dApps could pay that, but then users are not anymore 100% free on really choosing the dApp that fits their need best, but they would choose, the dApp that would pay transaction fees. So it's I think this discussion has different points of views. I'm interested in your points of view, but so far in the Gnosis Safe, users have to pay the transaction fees, and we will for sure change that for the new user onboarding, but long term we currently don't see an alternative to that. Then we are planning on leveraging these batch transactions. I explained the example before. Instead of having 4 pop-ups to make a transaction, there would only be 1. And the question there is more how to do that on a technical level. Would we offer an easy interface for dApp developers to tap into that, or would we have to basically do an integration for every dApp separately? That's something that our engineers have to figure out. Another big topic for us is how to contain the risk of a transaction. So if you have all your funds in this one smart contract and then you make a transaction, it could be a simple interaction with a decentralized exchange. And it is, like, for a user, it's pretty much impossible to really understand what a smart contract call does. So in the worst case, it could drain all your funds. So what are ways to mitigate that? Sure, only interact or somehow try to find a way to interact with audited and really known smart contracts, which is also very hard. The user interface has to basically expose this kind of information, and you would have to trust the interface. So on a smart contract level, we could implement these things like spanning limits and whitelisted contracts, which is what we are planning. But then also, and this is a concept that we are currently thinking through, we don't have an idea yet on how to build it exactly on a technical level, but we thought it would be a good idea to have basically a separate account per dApp. So if you interact with the first dApp, you would have basically it's not really an ephemeral address, because you would still be able to access it via your Gnosis Safe, but it would be different to the one from the next step. So if and then only the funds that are stored that are approved for this step are basically at risk, and thereby we could basically mitigate that risk that your core funds are at risk. And an alternative, of course, would be you have not only one Gnosis Safe, but you have a separate one per dApp, which is leading to the same result, but it could be a little harder for the interface to implement a nice user experience. This is, I think, also a no-brainer. We are thinking about how to integrate best with exchanges, and also what's the best way to allow users to insure their funds. Because not only but especially for institutional investors, the biggest friction to get into crypto right now is that they have to find a secure or fund storage solution they trust. And smart contracts have great potential, but it's hard. Like, they cannot just simply tell their stakeholders, sorry, there was a bug, we lost all our funds. So we have to see how to make that work. On that note, and this is basically the slide I would like to end with, currently we always talk about crypto wallets. But is that term wallet maybe outdated? Because people then also talk about, hey, you should be your own bank. So should wallets be actually bank accounts? Does it now mean, if we talk about bank accounts, well, if I have my bank account in like my regular non-Web3 bank, then even if it's small, but I expect a little bit of interest maybe. And so but on Web3, earning interest is a debt, and it's usually not part of the wallet. So should this be integrated or should this be separate? So essentially, in which direction should wallets go long term? Should wallets accumulate more features inside the application? So basically you can borrow, you can lend, and do all the things that users would like to do with DeFi inside the dApp? Or should wallets basically reduce their feature set, and so that wallets are just the authenticator, that they just make sure you can recover, you can authorize transaction, you implement some kind of access management hierarchies if you'd like to, and all the other things are basically inside the dApp. And we don't know yet, but I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that, what you believe would be the best way. Thanks.
Oh yeah, it said the private key is in the Gnosis safe, but what happens if you lose your phone? I don't understand what is different at the moment to having to still keep your seed phrase.
Sure. So there's different private keys. You have your seed phrase, that is one private key. You have on the phone another private key, and then if you have that browser extension, it would be another one. You would need basically the browser extension and the phone to make a transaction, or for recovery, you still have that seed phrase. It is different. It is the same like the status quo, that you would have to make sure to keep that seed phrase secure. It is different that you don't carry around that single private key always. So if with your current crypto wallet, this would be the same that you would also carry around. So if one user finds somehow if an attacker is somehow able to extract the private key from your wallet, they would have access to all your funds. With the Gnosis Safe, this is different because you can only then extract that one single private key that is on the phone, but you would not be able to make a transaction because you would still need either the one that you have locked at home, or you need the one from the browser extension to authorize that transaction. So that's to that question, that's the only advantage we have implemented yet. There's the potential things like the seedless recovery that I must admit we don't have it in the app yet.
Hi, my question is related. So I want to hear more about recovery, because social recovery, okay, it's great, but I don't really trust my friends, especially with crypto. Another solution is like trusting the company like Gnosis or Argent, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So do you have any solution like, I don't know.
So the question was about social recovery, that you put some burden on your friends or your family, that in the case that you lost your private key, you can go to them and say like, can you give me back access? And this is, I think this is quite a burden, and I'm not sure if I either trust my friends or if I really want to put that burden on them. We don't have the ideal solution yet. One solution is it doesn't have to be your friends. It could also be you that just has a set of other, let's say, hardware wallets in some secure places or whatever your security model is. There is one solution, and another one is, you mentioned you could also have some kind of custodians. So I believe Argent has what they called Argent Guard, which is Argent the company basically being able to recover accounts. And that really depends on the use case. That really depends on you as a user, if you trust that company and if that is enough for you. Because even though there's quite some idealistic perspectives in this space, but to a certain extent, I think most of us still trust like banks or like some institutions. It doesn't have to be banks. Maybe that's a bad example, but some institutions. And so these institutions could then work as custodians. And if you don't trust a single one, maybe then for you, you connect that with like maybe you choose 2 of them or 3 of them, and of course, the more you choose, if one of them doesn't want to help you, you're in trouble. But maybe they can control each other. But then you get again down the rabbit hole of how do they control each other? What if there's a bad actor? What if there's all the others are bad actors and there's a single good one? And so we don't have that great solution there. And from what we've heard also from users that would currently use crypto, that also work in this space, that think or that do understand how things work, is they feel more comfortable still with the seed phrase, because then at least they control it. And well, if they mess up, it's them and not someone else. So it's more.
I would like to see like an elegant solution, like a dead man switch combined with, crypto economic incentives, like you stake something in order to recover.
Yeah.
And if you fail, you lose your stake.
Yeah.
But do you have any thoughts on that? Have you worked on that?
Yeah. So besides social recovery, like time locks and this dead man switch, or some call it paralysis proof, these are I think the 3 most popular concepts, and I believe a solution has to combine these 3. And so time locks are good because then the basically rightful owner of the wallet could reverse a bad action of another actor. Of course, the question is, how long do you set this time lock? If you set it short, it's very convenient, but you basically have, like if you set it to 1 day, you should check every day, oh, did someone start a recovery attempt? If you put it too long, then this is also a problem, because if you lose funds, you probably want to get it back access faster. But again, there's a matter of the use case, basically, or like that. And I think this has to be combined with like a bond you put up, or like a stake, how you call it, because that of course you'll have to see. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like an incentive, or basically a penalty you then put in, that users, well, you hope that there isn't just an attack that just tries to brute force recover all wallets, and if they have to then put down like 1 ETH or whatever it is, then you reduce the probability of that happening. But it's even that, I think it is a better solution than without it, but it's still not ideal, because how big should that bounty be, or that bond be? And because if you have lost access to your funds, then you also cannot put up a bond. Sure, you can maybe, if you still have some fiat currency, you get more crypto. This is I currently don't see an ideal solution. And another potential problem that exists there is as well, that's an implementation detail, but I think it's a relevant one, because assuming you have social recovery, or you have 3 devices at home that basically are your recovery factors, on chain you would then see that these are the recovery factors, and then people would know, oh, you have 3 of them. And this is worse when it's other people, because then somehow maybe you could deduct who these people are, and then this is another attack vector. So what I'm trying to get at is it's another privacy concern, that if you have all this information stored on chain, that you can somehow deduct what kind of security mechanisms a person has in place, and this might impair your security as well. So that, of course, you can maybe counter with some more privacy technology, like some commit reveal schemes, but it's just another aspect of the problem.
Okay, hi. I like this question here and want to give some thoughts and then ask your question about it. Mm-hmm. The biggest fintech company in the world is Ant Financial, Alibaba Ant Financial. Mm-hmm. And they started as a wallet, right? Alipay was basically PayPal, right? And they started as a wallet, and they were really good at payments across their e-commerce network. And then they added savings, and then they added lending, and then they added wealth management, and they had a full stack, and then they created a bank. They became a digital bank. So they had the full stack. They went kind of like what you're talking about. Should wallets become a bank account? Yeah, that's what they did, and they became the biggest fintech company in the world. I think what was really powerful there is that they had not only the wallet, which gave them the daily interaction with the user, just a critical piece of functionality for the user, but they also had a distribution network. They could distribute through their e-commerce network. And then WeChat came along and did the same thing. A wallet distributed through social network, right? In Web3, in a decentralized network, what is the distribution mechanism? And where do you play in that distribution network? You already have the wallet, but now you have to distribute. The question is, can you build wallet functionality directly into the protocol? Can protocols adopt a specific wallet or specific functionality and build it right into their protocol? So anybody that wants to use that protocol must use your functionality. And is that the way to go?
That is, yeah, interesting take on that. I think this boils down to the question, like one of the basically strength of the current, well, DeFi movement is that you're not really locked into one app or dApp, right? You can move your funds relatively easily somewhere else. So if you're locked into like a thing like, well, Alibaba or the company behind it, then this gets harder for you as a user. But then on the other hand side, how many users even do have the knowledge or do take the time to really go through the available options and see like what is the best one? So there's also different use cases, right? There's people who are really willing to go this extra mile and check out where do I get the best interest rate if you would like to basically lend out money, and others that don't. And you asked about the distribution network, and this is, you're right. If we just have the authenticator functionality, then of course the application, like what was formerly then a wallet, has a harder job of basically keeping users to a certain extent, and that's that you have these pros and cons. So I currently lean towards adding more features, because users, like you have to present users with options, and if they are too far away and they have to look them up and really dig through the options, most people, at least not right away, wouldn't do it. They would only do it if they really think about the underlying concepts and so on, which with Web3 we basically want people to do. And so this is, I don't have a good answer. All right.
Anyone else have questions?
Cool. Then thank you.